welcome to Cells4Life's live stream. Thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate World Cord Blood Day 2019. My name is Claudia Rees and I'm joined by Dr. Lesley-Ann Martin.
Hello.
Who is our Chief Scientific Officer. And today we're going to be trying to answer as many of your questions as we can about umbilical cord stem cell banking. So do please send all of the questions that come to mind to our live feed, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can. And we are also going to be answering some of the questions that have been sent in to us over the last week. The very first cord blood transplant took place in 1988, and since then it's been used to treat over 35,000 patients for a huge range of conditions, from leukemia, lymphoma, various other blood and immune disorders. There are over 80 today. Even more excitingly though, stem cells are central to a new area of science known as regenerative medicine. There are currently over 7,000 clinical trials investigating the use of stem cells to treat conditions that will affect all of us throughout our lives. Things like osteoarthritis, heart disease, diabetes, and many others. The objective of today is to help raise awareness of the amazing things that umbilical cord blood stem cells can do, so that as many parents as possible can take advantage of this incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So, to start with some questions, Lesley-Ann, to begin, would you mind just telling us a bit about your background and what you were doing at the Institute of Cancer Research before you joined Cells4Life?
Absolutely. So I hold a doctorate in molecular biology, and I was a group leader at the Institute of Cancer Research for 20 years. And my background is in the development of model systems. In particular, we were investigating patients who had hormone receptor positive breast cancer. And these patients are treated with endocrine therapies. And whilst these are very good clinically, we found that 30 to 40% of patients relapsed. And what my team did was to develop systems where we could model the patient at primary diagnosis and then when she'd relapsed. And by comparing the two, identify new drug targets. This led to many clinical trials that were piloted in the Royal Marsden Hospital. And because of my expertise, I sat on the advisory boards for some of the major pharmaceutical companies. I'm also widely published in journals such as The Lancet, Cancer Discovery, and Cancer Cell.
Thank you very much. So let's go to the first of your questions. Melissa has asked us, what are stem cells and why are the stem cells that you find in umbilical cords so important?
Oh, Melissa, that's a great question. So when we think of stem cells, they're basically the building blocks for all of our tissues. They're rather like a blank canvas that an artist will paint on. So within your body as an adult, you have stem cells associated with all of your tissues, and they're there for regeneration and repair. But the problem is, as we age, we lose these stem cells. Cord blood is a perfect resource for the very early stem cells. And so by preserving them, we have access to those early blank canvases that we can use for therapies in the future. So if I was to describe the types of stem cells, we have the hematopoietic stem cells. These are rather like the stem cells that you find in your bone marrow. So those are the blank canvases that make up the different forms of blood cells. So your red blood cells, your white blood cells that target pathogens, and also your platelets, so those are used for clotting, for instance. And then there's another form of stem cell called the mesenchymal stem cell, and these are very exciting because these can be differentiated into all types of tissue within the body. So as I said to start with, the fact that we have a high level of these stem cells in the cord blood and cord tissue to start with, and the fact that we're actually going to throw this away at the end of the birthing process, this is a fantastic resource to store, and it was one of the reasons that I stored my own children's stem cells.
Thank you. The next question is from Lucy, and I'll have a go at this one myself. It's, why should she bank her baby's stem cells? The main reason for doing this is it gives your child access to this wonderful resource that Lesley-Ann has just talked about. It means that they have their own perfect stem cell match ready and waiting should they need it for any of the incredible therapies that are coming through today. And that actually brings us quite nicely onto a question that was sent in from Matthew. He's asked, what conditions can we treat today using stem cells, and what are they expected to be used for in the future?
So Matthew, at the moment, and over the last 30 odd years, stem cells have been used for the treatment of patients who have had high-dose chemotherapy. And that's because a patient suffers with a thing called neutropenia. You basically knock out the bone marrow. And so we can replace the stem cells using cord blood. The cord blood can also be used for metabolic disorders where the body doesn't properly process food. But what I would say is for the blood disorders and metabolic disorders, these are incredibly rare. If we just took an example, for instance, of Krabb's disease, that occurs in about 1 in 100,000 to 1 in 200,000 patients. And also, what I would like to say is in the case of childhood leukemias, it is more than likely, if a child is to contract a leukemia, that the cord blood will be from a matched donor rather than its own blood. I think that what we're looking at here for cord blood and cord tissue is the regenerative medicine, this exciting field of science, which hopefully will allow treatment of things like osteoarthritis, heart disease, strokes. It's really limitless.
Fantastic. And the next question that we've been asked is what is the process on the day? We know what these cells are, but how do we collect them? And the process is really quite straightforward. It's very easy. In most cases, it won't be possible for your healthcare professional to perform the collection. So we will assign a phlebotomist, which is a trained and licensed specialist in collecting umbilical cord blood stem cells. And they will be on call to you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you can go into labour on Christmas Day and know that someone will be there. And then if you've got a planned C-section, it's actually very straightforward. You say to them, my C-section is at X time, make sure you're there, and they will do. But if you're having a natural delivery, it's also very easy, because all you need to do, and actually it'll probably be your birth partner, is give the phlebotomist a call, let them know that you're on the way to hospital, and then keep them updated with any progressions in the labour. And they will make sure that they come to the hospital in plenty of time to perform the collection. The collection itself takes place after the 3rd stage of labour, so after the placenta has been delivered and the umbilical cord has been clamped. They're then transferred to a separate room, so it doesn't interfere with getting to know your new baby or anything like that. And the phlebotomist will use the collection kit, which is something that we also provide to you. They'll use a blood bag to collect the blood via simple gravity flow, and they'll also clean and cut a section of the cord tissue as well, place them into a pot, and package them back into the kit. And then all your birth partner would need to do is phone the number on the collection kit, and we will send one of our 24/7 dedicated medical couriers to pick up that box, bring it straight back to our laboratory, and it'll be processed. So the whole thing itself is very non-invasive. There's very little for you to do. There's not someone there in the room with you when you're delivering baby or anything like that. It's really easy. Okay, on to our next question. And Amanda also wants to know what happens when the stem cells get back to our laboratory.
So Amanda, what we do is to provide each of our patients, we call them our patients, a unique barcode identifier, and that allows us to track your baby's blood and cord tissue throughout the processing and storage, and allows us to access it if you need to at any time. So the blood sample will come into us, and it's taken by our dedicated operators into a clean room. This is a completely sterile environment so that the blood sample cannot be contaminated and remains clean. During the processing, the environment is continually monitored. Now, I think if you've looked at our website, we have 2 ways of processing the cord blood. One is to use an AXP system, which is a volume reduction, and that's rather unique to Cells4Life and actually the NHS. And then we have our Cells Plus, which is our TotiSite system. And TotiSite is a CE marked medical device where we can enrich the number of stem cells that we actually purify by 3 times. Once we have the sample processed, it is then frozen very, very slowly down to -80 degrees and then put into cryogenic storage at temperatures below 150 degrees. So that puts the cells into suspended animation. What we also do is to take a blood sample from the mother, and that is screened for certain viruses like hepatitis B and hepatitis C. Those data are all collated together, and once we've processed the sample and banked down, then you receive a certificate which will tell you the viability of your sample and also the total number of nucleated cells. Again, what I want to reiterate here and point out to you is the speed of processing is very important. We want to get as many cells as we can with the highest viability, and so speed is of the essence. And this is why we're continually monitoring during the processing our viability and our total nucleated cell counts.
Brilliant. And Becky on our live stream has asked, would I own the sample or would it belong to Cells4Life? That's very straightforward. The sample belongs to you, and actually ultimately it belongs to your child. So when we set the service up, we require the mother's consent, because it's your tissue, to send someone in and take that sample. We bring it back to our laboratory and keep it in storage, ready and waiting should your family or your child need those cells. And they belong exclusively to the child, and would only be used either with your consent as their guardian or with the child's consent. On to our next question. We've also been asked by Jenna, why should I choose Cells4Life? What makes Cells4Life different? And I think Leslie Ann's touched on that already. The reason why you would want to choose Cells4Life is because everything that we do is designed to ensure that we capture as many of your child's stem cells as possible. A number of cells is really important for two reasons. Firstly, it determines the size and weight of patient that you're able to treat. So if you only had a small number of cells, that sample might be limited to treating a small child. If you've got more cells, you can potentially treat a fully grown adult. And that is, as I say, very much dependent on cell count. Additionally, number of cells determines whether you could have just one treatment or potentially multiple treatments so that you can use those cells more than once. The way we do this, as Leslie Ann mentioned, is using our Cells Plus processing technology, which the service is called Cells Plus. The technology itself is TotiSite, which is something that we developed in-house. And this delivers 3 times more stem cells at the point of therapy than any other processing method that we've tested. And that's just so important for when you come to use the cells, which is, after all, why you're storing them. The other things that we do are make sure that all of our services are 24/7, 365 days a year. Again, because the sooner you can get those cells processed, the more you're going to retain and the more useful that sample is going to be. We also give you the option to split the samples into multiple units so that you could potentially use those cells again more than once without having to thaw and then refreeze cells, which would result in cell loss potentially. And again, unique to us, we have 2 separate facilities in the UK where you can split the samples so that you know that in the extremely unlikely event that there was a problem at one of our laboratories and storage facilities, you know that the remainder is still safely stored elsewhere. Okay, we've got a question from Katie on Instagram, and she says that she's stored with us before, and can we explain the different types of cells that you get in cord blood?
Yes, that's a very interesting one. So the cord blood has 2 types of stem cells in it. The first is the hematopoietic stem cells. So these actually are the building blocks for your blood cells. So these make your red blood cells and your white blood cells. The white blood cells are those that protect your body from pathogens. And you also have the platelets. Then in the cord blood, you also have the mesenchymal stem cells. These are also called stromal cells now in the literature, and these are highly plastic. They are immune privileged, and they form all manner of tissues. So for instance, they can form chondrocytes, which are the building blocks for cartilage, osteocytes, the building blocks for bone. They've been used for neurodegenerative disorders, so they're able to signal to neurons and develop into neurons themselves. And of course, the new holy grail is for the bioengineering, and that is the three-dimensional tissue printing, where you can generate an organ from the mesenchymal stem cells.
Cool. And then we've got two questions that are quite similar from Nina and Becky on our live feed. And this relates to something known as delayed cord clamping. And what they want to know is, can you, when the baby is born, can you wait a while before you clamp the cord? So wait until the cord stops pulsating, allow blood to transfer to the cord to the baby, and then clamp the cord and still be able to store umbilical cord blood and tissue stem cells. And the answer to this question is very much yes. We very much support you being able to make the choices that you want around your birth. We would never want stem cell collection to get in the way. When it comes to delaying the clamping of the cord, for a period of more than 2 minutes, it probably will result in a lower volume of blood available to collect. But because of the Totisite technology that we just talked about, it means that this is not a problem. So with Totisite, after waiting for white, a long delay of say 20 minutes, we'll get a volume of probably 20 milliliters compared to the normal 50 milliliters. But with Totisite, a volume of 20 milliliters is equivalent in cell count to a volume of say 60 milliliters after immediate cord clamping. So in short, yes, you definitely can. There is usually about 20 milliliters of cord blood still residual in the cord after a long delay. And to make the most of that smaller volume of blood, choose Totisite, and you'll still have a very good sample. The other thing to bear in mind is it's pretty much always possible to collect the cord tissue. So even in the very rare event that all of the blood in the cord is clotted and we can't collect cord blood, we'll pretty much always get umbilical cord tissue. Okay, we've got another question from Megan on Instagram, and we've been asked, could future siblings be a match for the firstborn stem cells?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So to describe that, I'm going to go through a little bit of genetics. So your baby's genome is composed of genes from the mother and genes from the father. So if we were to look at a match with the parents, for instance, we would call that haploidentical. That's because 50% of your baby's stem cell genes are a match to either the mother or the father. Now, when we look at the siblings, there's probably a 25% chance of a complete match. And there's a 75% chance that the stem cells from one child can be used to treat another child. Interestingly, on this point, looking at the umbilical cord and the mesenchymal stem cells from the umbilical cord, because those are immune privileged, there is evidence that this would be suitable for the majority of your family members. So there is an asset there of storing not only your cord blood, but also the umbilical cord tissue itself. Okay. I hope that's answered your question, Amanda.
So Desislava on Facebook is expecting non-identical twins. Congratulations. And she wants to know, is the procedure for collecting the cells still the same? The answer to that is yes, it's pretty much identical. The difference being that we would send you 2 collection kits rather than 1. And then when the placentas are delivered, either 1 placenta or 2 placentas, they'd be transferred to a separate room, and our phlebotomist will perform the collection. And what they'll do is they will make sure that the blood and cord from one side goes into one kit and the blood and cord from the other side goes into the other, so we know which belongs to which. And the other thing, which is good news for you, is for twins, because it puts the cost up by a whole extra person. We also reduce the price for the second child by 50%. Okay, the next question from Mandy is, what are the chances that I would need to use the stem cells? This is a really good question, actually, and when you're looking at the blood disorders that Leslie-Ann was talking about, the things that cord blood have historically been used for, the chances don't look that high. It's something like 1 in 10,000.
Yes.
However, the reason why most people store is for use in regenerative medicine. And I think back in 2008, it was forecasted that 1 in 3 people would benefit from a regenerative therapy at some point in their lifetime. Since then, we've seen some really incredible advances in stem cell therapy. We're getting to the point where all of the exciting opportunities that were being talked about in the press, say 10 years ago, are now starting to
fruition.
Exactly, they're coming through as clinical trials in man and seeing some really great results. So with that in mind, I'd say it's probably even less than 1 in 3 now.
I think that when we consider that we are an aging population, our children are going to be living a lot longer, which means that many of the degenerative disorders that we suffer, they're going to have to live longer with, such as osteoarthritis. The majority of us will be hit with osteoarthritis at some point in our lives. And the potential here again of using stem cells to develop chondrocytes and osteoblasts, so bone and cartilage, removing the need for a knee or hip replacement. It's just an extremely exciting field. And as Claudia said, the clinical trials are coming through in droves now.
Yeah, that's really exciting. The next question I have that was sent in last week is from Roberta, and she's asked us about the cost of cord blood banking. With Cells4Life, the cost for our introductory service, the Cells service, which uses the same technology as the NHS that Leslie-Ann mentioned earlier, it starts at 1,495 for the processing, and then £65 a year to keep those cells in storage. There are some other options as well. So you can upgrade to the TotiSite service that delivers 3 times more stem cells for £250. You can also choose to store cord tissue, which is an additional £595, and takes the annuity, the fee per year, to £100. So there are lots of different options, and the way we've constructed the services is that you can build the package that works best for you and your family, and hopefully everyone has access to being able to store these cells. Oh, and actually running alongside that, we've also just had the question, do you offer payment plans? And yes, we do. We give you the option to store, to spread the cost of the upfront payment, the 1,495, over a period of 12 months, because obviously having a baby is a very expensive time, and that cuts it down to very easy, manageable payments on a monthly basis. Okay, back to our questions from the last week. Maria wants to know, why would we store umbilical cord tissue as well as cord blood?
I think, Maria, this gives you 2 bites of the cherry. As Claudia was saying, Cells4Life is an advocate of delayed cord clamping. We feel that the baby's health comes first, which means that sometimes the volume of blood can be unreliable. We know that you've always got access to the umbilical cord, and so that's a ready source of mesenchymal stem cells. And as I said earlier, there are so many trials now being conducted looking at the use of mesenchymal stem cells for the treatment of neurodegenerative disorders, diabetes, osteoarthritis, as I've mentioned before, cerebral palsy, autism. The list is endless, and that is because these cells are a blank canvas. They can be made into any tissue. And there's also strong evidence that the mesenchymal stem cells signal to other cells, making them healthier. And as regards the cord blood, we, as Claudia said, with TotiSite can get 3 times more stem cells from a small volume of blood than the other technologies that we've piloted in-house. But the cord blood gives us access to the hematopoietic stem cells. So these are the ones, as I said before, that create your immune system, your white blood cells, your red blood cells, and your platelets. So I think if you have the opportunity to store both, I know that if I had had the opportunity so many years ago when I had my children and I stored their cord blood, I would absolutely have stored the umbilical cord tissue as well.
Yeah, I think when you have that amazing resource available to you,
yes.
you take advantage of getting as many cells and as many cell types as you possibly can. Okay, super. Our next question from Megan on Instagram is, how many times can I defrost the sample and use it?
Well, that's very interesting, Megan. So I would say if you store it as one lot, as we would call it, then you can only defrost it and use it once. But at Cells4Life, they offer a process where you can store in what we call aliquots, so smaller volumes, which means that you can dip in and out as you need them. What I would say here is, as our technologies in science advance, the likelihood is that we're going to need fewer and fewer stem cells in order to generate the therapies, because we will be able to amplify them, so grow more of them very effectively. So I think, again, if I had the choice, I would have stored in lots of separate aliquots. And as I think you're probably thinking, that's the way forward if you want to dip in and out.
Yeah, definitely. The next question that we have is from Emma, and she has asked what Plus Protect insurance is. This is an additional service that we offer, and it's available to anyone with a cord blood sample in storage. And it's a medical expenses policy, essentially, but with stem cell storage in mind. So you may or may not be aware, using stem cells can be expensive. It might be a therapy that's covered by the NHS, or you might be traveling to the US to receive sort of one of the cutting edge therapies, and you'll have to cover things like the cost of traveling there, living in a different country for a period of time, or even modifying your home and things like that. And this Plus Protect stem cell insurance policy is a one-time payment of £75,000 in the event that your child is diagnosed with one of the listed conditions that can be treated using cord blood, so that finances would never get in the way of taking advantage of these therapies. Okay, on to our next question. Jules wants to know, how many samples have Cells4Life released?
Cells4Life have released 13 samples, thankfully only 13, and they have been released for very severe conditions such as neonatal stroke, cerebral palsy, and severe autism. We would hope not to release samples for such conditions. We believe that this is an insurance policy. This is for the field of regenerative medicine. These are parents who want to ensure that they can take advantage of the cutting edge technologies that will be transforming the face of medicine, and in particular, personalised medicine in the future.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think one of the things to bear in mind when you look at the therapies that the samples have been released for is most of them are these cutting edge clinical trials for things like brain injury. So again, the chance of needing to use stem cells for things like leukemia is very unlikely, and that's borne out in what we've released cells for. I think there's only been a couple that have been for blood disorders. The vast majority have been in the last 3 or 4 years and have been to enroll on pioneering clinical trials in the US to treat brain injuries, and they're getting some really fantastic results.
And I think also for treating siblings with a metabolic disorder as well. So I think that goes back to one of the questions previously about whether the cord blood sample from one child could be used for another child.
Okay, on to our next question. Susie on Instagram has asked, can I do placenta encapsulation and cord blood banking? The answer to this is very much yes. So after the placenta is delivered and the cord is cut and clamped, as I said, it's taken into a separate room where we carry out the stem cell collection. We will take the blood from the umbilical cord and a section of the umbilical cord itself as well if you choose to store cord tissue, but the placenta remains completely intact. Once we've collected the stem cells, you're more than welcome to do whatever you like with it. I know there are people who sort of take them home and bury them in the garden. You can make placenta encapsulation pills. It's entirely up to you. Okay, and we've got another question here. What are the laws for cord blood banking, from Stephanie? Cord blood banking is actually a really highly regulated industry. It's regulated by a government body called the Human Tissue Authority, and they are responsible for making sure that absolutely everything that we do is done to the highest levels of quality and safety. You can't operate as a cord blood bank in the UK unless you are licensed by the Human Tissue Authority, and they have a very stringent set of standards that you have to meet in order to achieve that license. And then actually to maintain that license, they come and visit us every 2 years and inspect every aspect of what we do to ensure that we're still compliant. So in terms of regulation, it's I don't think you could get much tougher.
That's right. So the HTA are also used to regulate clinical trials as well. So that shows you the degree of rigour that we are under. Okay,
fantastic. I think we're going to start drawing this to a close, but I just have one last question from me, actually, which is to Leslie Ann, and it is, what is the single thing that gets you most excited about the future of stem cells?
For me, it's personalised medicine. The fact that those stem cells can be used to generate new organs. In the future, we'll be bioprinting kidneys and hearts. For me, as an expert in studying drugs, it is the possibility of developing a chip with mini organs on it that can then be treated with drugs, and I'll be able to tell you which drug is going to work on which organ for which disease, personally for you. For me, that's groundbreaking. That takes away all of the potential toxicities that you see with drugs. The bioengineering field, again, the chance that you won't need hip or knee replacements, you use stem cells, and those will regenerate cartilage and bone. Heart disease, patients who may not be able to undergo heart surgery, you can use mesenchymal stem cells to repair scarring. It's limitless. I don't think I could actually put my finger on one thing, so I'm just going to say personalised medicine for the future.
Cool, fantastic. Well, that's a wrap for our live stream. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us celebrate World Cord Blood Day. It's been really good fun, and hopefully we've been able to answer some of your questions as well. We'd love to continue the conversation. So if you have any further questions, then just post them onto our social media feeds. You can post on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We'd love to answer. Also, if you have any suggestions for next time or how we could improve this live event, we'd be really interested to hear them. If you would like to know more about cord blood banking with Cells4Life, you can visit our website, which is cells4life.com, and download your information pack there. And when you're ready to sign up for the service, give our customer care teams a call on 01444 873 950, and we'd love to help get this in place for you. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.